Good evening. I first met Khaled Mattawa through poems that came in what used to be called Across the Transom, when manuscripts came on paper in envelopes, to the Kenyan Review when I was its editor in the early 1990s. Khaled was still a graduate student then, and as the accompanying letter told me, had only been resident in the United States for a dozen years, where he had come as a teenage student from his native Libya. The poems themselves attested to displacement and to a point of view enriched by what has been called, in a parallel context, double vision, that managed to richly incarnate the details, delights, and implications of the poet's present reality juxtaposed upon those of the geography of his childhood and the mother tongue that keeps enriching his adopted language. I published more than one group of poems by this challenging young writer, kept in touch with him and with his work. The publication of a first book, Ismailia Eclipse, soon afterwards in 1995. Khaled's emergence as a translator of contemporary Arabic poetry with collections by the exiled Iraqi dissident poets Fadil al-Alazawi and Saadi Youssef was followed by two more collections of his own poems, expanding lyric in English with their historical reach and emotional depth, and more translations, including that of a dazzling younger Egyptian woman modernist, Iman Mersal. He also edited or co-edited anthologies of Arab-American writing, wrote germinal essays on the situation of the Arab-American writer and the relevance of classical and contemporary Arabic poetry to Western writers of any origin. This year has seen the publication of Khaled's translation of an important collection spanning 40 years of the work of the Syro-Lebanese poet Adonis, perhaps the most significant living poet and literary theorist of the Arab world. But it was in particular the publication year of Khaled's own fourth collection, Tocqueville, and the title says something about Khaled's looking at the world and the place he finds himself. A book that's as daring in its amalgam of poetic techniques as it is dazzling in the breadth of its subject matter, which veers from political horror to political satire. A book whose title poem uses the explosive discontinuities of experimental poetry to fulfill a narrative and indeed epic impulse, the quixotic epic of the exiled and assimilated assessing history, of which Khaled himself had written in an earlier essay. In a period when I think the American reading public is beginning to recognize the importance and necessity of translating poetry and doing so from as wide a range of sources as possible, Khaled has emerged as one of the best translators of contemporary poetry from Arabic or indeed any language, creating viable, memorable poems in the receptor language. But that work is only the minor part of his own great talent and its even greater application through which he has emerged as one of the most original, lyrical, and intellectually challenging American poets of his generation. Khaled Mattawa.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Marilyn. They told me about this prize back in March, I think, and then they announced it in September, which was all as well, because it gave me 5 months to forget that this thing ever happened. And so I bought all the 4 books that Marilyn read there. Where I grew up, if you went to deliver bad news or good news, you never went alone. You came in company, so I brought all the books together, and they will keep each other company. On the difficulty of documentation. The village women carry the moon on their heads, each carrying a piece or each carrying her own moon, the jugs of white stoneware in Myrtle Winter's photo. See how light spills into their dark robes, in thin array after a pleasant guise, when her loose gown from her shoulders did fall, Wyatt. Its white deluge is the phosphorescence of their headscarves radiating against twilight, each a planet then rejoining a galaxy on the run. I recall such people have no time for beauty. I recall beauty is one of the great conversation stoppers of all time. Evidence is plentiful that the twilight these women walk is a betrayal, the child whose skin is a crumbled sack around the muscles of his legs and buttocks. Look at how his mother's beauty is fleeing. Look at the faces that evoke an age-old deferral. Alas, we who wish to lay the foundations of kindness could not ourselves be kind, but you, when at last it comes to pass, do not judge us too harshly, Brecht. Do not judge us for this strange fashion of forsaking, Wyatt, because what beauty does is almost a crime, Brecht, and what the photographer's eyes take from them must be a kind of theft too. But why do they flee from me, these beauties that sometime did me seek, Wyatt, into refugee tents, weighed down with thirst, toward children whose shaved heads gleam and men whose faces are horoscopes of dejection? And what of that look and the all too human, to be enthralled and fain know what she hath deserved, Wyatt, the squalor that makes the brow grow stern, the just anger that turns a voice harsh, Brecht. What else could she do as she parts but softly say, "Oh, dear heart, how like you this, Wyatt?" And I recall how they flee from me, gentle, tame, and meek, how they range, busily seeking with continuous change, Wyatt. And I know there's wisdom and lyricism coming behind me, so I will engage you in some panic. Tocqueville. An offer to discuss. He wears a thin graying beard, keffiyeh flaunted on shoulders. She's got a school marmish face, this time black. On the Horn of Africa, pirates on the water, technicals with Kalashnikovs on pickup trucks, streetlights ripped for scrap metal, rebel leader, president, cell phones, shuddering bank accounts in Dubai. We are all Christians now, said Mandelstam. Ajami, Abize, Dries, Gonzalez, Yu, Viet Din. With people like that leading the action, you can't call it racism. That's what you call the karma of yellow-brown folks. If you want these people to play your national anthem when your envoy visits, if you want them to open a branch of the Chamber of Commerce or Chase Manhattan, you've got to set the whole thing up. They're not going for that anymore. And anyhow, do you know how many countries make their own AK-47s now? And Uzis too, but that's more of a fashion statement. And you'd have to wonder what they're doing for water and electricity. Everybody's got generators now. Some people installed windmills on their roofs. Chinese made Danish technology, kerosene less expensive than water. And hasn't everybody dug a well and a pump to suck whatever municipality gets through the old pipes? What municipality water? That's all gone now. The sewage system has been out for years. You could make good money building cisterns there and good money renting the trucks that suck the shit out. You dump it in the sea, of course. From Aristotle on, Republican theorists have stressed the importance of the middle class for the success of free institutions. Neither powerful nor powerless, they vacillate between a desire to protect what they possess and the freedom to acquire more. They split the difference by deifying the liberty granted to each of them. They agree to disagree. The bonds formed between them are the daggers they have thrust into each other's backs. They see this as an ideal kind of harmony, and they're willing to die for it, which is why images of the demonstrators singing a hymn or being beaten by the police is discombobulating. The scent of virtue begins to sting your eyes because you know it's rising from a pile of burning corpses. I like it, but do you think anyone but a leftist or a fascist review would publish this? Sometimes I want to call what I see through the keyhole a flower. Then I see the clock racing, the digits tumbling over themselves. Then I turn to her face and ask a question of love. An orderly, gentle, peaceful slavery which could be combined more easily than is generally supposed with some of the external forms of freedom, and there is a possibility of getting itself established even under the shadow of the sovereignty of the people. You just have to look at her face and wonder, could she have been best friends with one of the little girls from Alabama? You almost said long ago. And then you see the way he raised his arms as if he's pleading, or like one of the singers from that world, and you know she'll never understand him. She'll say, "We're not talking to you." And she'll sound just like putting her teenage girl under curfew, that stern face. Then she'll send an envoy. Does she have a teenage daughter? I don't know, but I hear she's dating a Canadian diplomat, the Canadian foreign minister, and he looks like a young Max von Sydow. Who's that? A Swedish actor. He plays Nazi officers all the time, very blonde. So what do you make of that? It's been called the Electra complex. All the nightclubs in the city have closed. They have become refugee camps. We sing at wedding parties, maybe once a month. If we had a concert, the militias might come and rob the audience and us, but they would make sure they enjoyed the music first. The wedding parties are big, spectacular affairs. You wouldn't think they were in a country without a government. Only the people with the big armed clans can have these parties. Other people just get married in secret. He was my best friend, and they arrested him for uploading child pornography. He was my best friend. I didn't know how to use the internet back then, and I remember him so kind, though a part of me was repulsed by his fingers. All those hand-rolled cigarettes his father used to walk around with an oxygen tank, had emphysema and smoked on the sly until he died. Their house was large in a rich neighborhood, but filthy. Where did he find the babies, the toddlers? Who'd let him near them? They're almost adults now, those babies, already masturbating, fantasizing. The horror of it is unbearable. He was my best friend. You sound like you loved him. Did you love him? I must have loved him or something. And I feel betrayed or angry. Not angry at him, but almost at myself. I know people go wrong somewhere, but why did I go wrong with him? How come this happened to someone I cared for? My shrink called at the time of the appointment. He didn't want to be technical, but said, "You canceled in less than 24 hours." I didn't want to be technical either, but I told him that I canceled within 23 and a half hours. Still, I don't blame him. If time is not money, what is it? And in that hour he was supposed to make money, what was he going to do with himself? In the small office, I could hear other patients talking with the therapist next door. Many times I tried to overhear what the other people were saying. I'd put down my head as if I'm thinking about what I'm trying to say, but I was just listening to what was being said next door. In the waiting room, there weren't enough magazines, so the patient didn't know what to do. I know we never wanted to see each other again, not in the clinic, not in the supermarket, not anywhere. A few minutes to the hour, the things come out calling our names, each taking a patient to his office. There must have been 20 offices inside, not tastefully decorated, something between Super 8 and Red Roof Inn, always a box of Kleenex near where the patient sat. I remember during one visit when I reached for the tissues and cried. It felt good to cry. I'm not a crying type of person. But when you overhear other people crying across the walls and you walk after the session and you'd been crying and you see someone else who'd been crying, you just wonder what's going on here. Ever tried to pinpoint yourself in one? How they shimmer like nocturnal cityscapes viewed from the sea, or the way the satellite eye zooms down on your house and then out and out and out like in the movies. A scent grows in the mind then, the fustiness, the ancient beard, the house made from sun-baked bricks and its salted sheepskins, the breath of dried palm fronds in my grandfather's house. And it goes on. You can get the panic yourself, more if you wish. I'll finish with one poem called Before. Somewhere between faith and grace, there is the footprint of logic, lost in the purest light, not hidden at all, but a vehicle, a necessity, neither mop nor bucket, but whatever gives the floor its shine. The sun through the window pours on the floor, and the wood glistens as if in praise, as if a child breaking into a run. That is what I see through the window now, a child breaking into a run for the simple flame that must burn, and because there are such words. Of course, I could be wailing. Of course, the child is not a memory, only a gesture on my part. Yesterday, I fed a friend's cat and talked to her. The town was emptied and filled with snow embroidered with tire tracks. I fed a friend's cat and she rubbed her sides against my calves. The thing to say now is that I'm in the middle of a life, in a house with the owners on holiday, or to say a car engine hums, the owner forgetting the keys inside, or is on its way to a crystalline loss. Here, deduction is howling at an oncoming storm. The thing is, I fed a friend's cat and later poured a bowl of milk for her, and she sniffed it, barely licked it, and left. The thought is, the life is. I visited graves, tombstones 10 feet high. I ran through the cemetery and laughed my Cairo laugh. I wanted to be arrested by the police, wanted someone to take down what I had to say. Whatever I would have said would have been the truth. But there was no one there, only dust and a shitload of romance. Only dust and the hum of the interstate. Detroit, Toledo, the hitchhiker hums a foreign song. I feed the cat and talk to her. I take the milk away and begin to forget, and the cat stares at the missing bowl. Billions of snowflakes in between, and the befores that follow the first before. Thank you all very much.